I want to talk a little bit about journalism because we live
Hmm?
in the age of pay to play, of paying an influencer $5,000 to wear a sweatshirt. Um, it's so blurry now, right? There's so many
Yeah.
magazines. So where do you think journalism is headed towards with all this kind of changes?
It's a good question. I don't pretend to know the future, but my general belief on how things evolve is that nothing ever gets wholesale replaced. You take the best of the old and the best of the new, and you eventually combine them into something. Um, I mean, I am disappointed to see the degree to which I think a lot of legacy media brands are. I think basically selling off the only thing that they have left, which is their reputation, and not selling it off in a way in which you could buy it and promote yourself, right? Like there's a lot of confusion which we should talk about, where people wonder, are stories in Entrepreneur or other major media outlets paid for? The answer is no, they are not paid for. But you know, a lot of media brands, Entrepreneur included, just to be frank, have kind of let the walls down about who can write for the publications, with the idea that, well, this is now like a kind of community platform, and any, like as long as you pass a kind of verification, you can write, and that brings a lot of value to people. But it also, I think, really ultimately kind of devalues these brands, which used to be based on really strong focus and curated material. You knew that if you read something in these brands, it was because 10 people looked at it and made sure that it was polished and clean and up to standards. And that's just not something that any brand can keep up when there are like just a bazillion pieces of content being posted online every day. And I worry about that. I just don't think that that's a law. I don't think that that's long term good for the media industry as a whole. But it is the model right now, and there's you take the good with the bad, because certainly there's good with it too. Um, and so what do I think? I think that there will always be a media ecosystem full of noise and full of chaos. That's the media ecosystem that we came from, and it's the one that we're building now, right? I mean, if you look back at the early days of newspapers in the United States of America, what you see is just chaos. You see every city that has like 12 different newspapers, and they're all owned by party men, and they all have completely contradictory information in them. And yet people found a way through, and they found the things that they trusted, and some elevated and became the New York Times, and some became the New York Sun and fell apart into nothingness. And that's just what it'll be, and that's what it'll always be. And I think that right now you are even seeing in the newsletter space, you're seeing really smart, accomplished, smart people. I said smart twice, but that's fine because they're smart. And they are establishing themselves as separate and above a lot of the other noise. And they will become the new standard bearers of people who are trustworthy and who will go out and gather information in a honest way. And the others will, I think, ultimately be seen for what they are. And in the middle will be a lot of noise. That's what it'll be.
I love that you validated that there's always going to be different business models. We live in a capitalist society, but I do think the value of knowing how to pitch yourself, it cannot be understated, right? You can't just hire someone to tell your story. For example, Lena's wigs, Lena knows her stuff more than anyone, right?
Yeah.
So I love that you said that journalism is not dead. You don't need to pay to play. You don't need to hire a fancy PR agency, but really get to your core.
Yeah.
Before we hop
And,
off,
and and actually, yeah, can I just say another thing about you don't need to pay to play? I mean, like, here's the thing. There are pay to play options out there. Typically, like what are they? Well, you could buy an article in some second, third, fourth tier publication. Um, if you do that, here is, I think, what you're going to get from it. Nothing. You're going to get nothing from it. And the reason is because if a publication has an audience, they can monetize the audience. If they don't have an audience, they have to monetize you. So you are going to pay to be in a publication that zero people are reading. I don't see how that's valuable. And then, yes, it is totally true that you might hear some story about how somebody um, and I'm just purely by example, random example here. I'm not making any accusations, but like somebody paid and they got into Forbes. Okay, well, what was that? I'll tell you what that was. That was not Forbes. That was not somebody at Forbes. What that was probably a bad actor who has become a contributor to Forbes and is somehow sneaking around and getting people to pay them to write about them in Forbes. And someday that is going to be found out, and that stuff is going to get deleted. It has happened at Entrepreneur, and we have deleted. We delete, delete, delete. So that means that you paid somebody who's a jerk, and you got nothing out of it. It's just not worth your time.
Yeah, I love what you said about it because, obviously I teach about the organic, right? Because it's so much easier to not do the work and just pay someone. But I love what you said about if they don't have an audience, they're going to monetize you. But if they have built up the audience, which is years or if not decades of
Yeah.
credibility, then they don't need to monetize you. So I love what you said about that because let's be honest, even to this day, like if I open up my Instagram, I get those spam messages all the time. Do you want to get featured in 30 under 30? Like
Oh,
no one's reading
get
that.
it all the time.
Or the best one is, do you want to pay $20,000 to be on a TV show that is going to broadcast at 5 a.m. or 4 a.m. that no one's going to watch, right?
Yes, that is such a thing. That is such a thing, right? You pay to be on like ABC. And so what somebody does is that they'll like film you and then they'll run it in this tiny market in South Dakota at 4 a.m. And so I guess technically it was on ABC, but zero people saw it. And now you have a video of it that I guess you can put on your website, but it's just garbage.